Know that we're here. Good evening, dear ones. Welcome to our Kirtan. We'll begin in just a few moments. We'll wait until the official stroke of 7 o'clock here in California. So let's begin this evening now with a prayer together. Please offer this from your heart, whether out loud or silently. Divine Mother, Heavenly Father, beloved friend God, great masters of self-realization, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswarji, and our Guru Paramhansa Yogananda Ji, saints and sages of all religions, humbly and lovingly we bow at thy feet. Divine Mother, as we sing to your name and to your heart, we become your instruments. Sing through us, sing with us, bless others throughout this world with this melody, with your divine presence. We bow continuously in honor of your joy, your love in our hearts. Come to us this evening. Om, peace, Amen. So this evening, as we chant, I'd like to suggest a simple, but perhaps a slightly odd way of looking at the chants, which is that so often we think of music or something, a piece of music, as this kind of thing out there, where we sort of get our minds around the words, or maybe it's a catchy melody, a catchy tune, catchy rhythm to it. But it's always something out there, and we sort of enjoy that thing out there. Tonight, I'd like to suggest that we look at these chants as our own children, our own sort of flesh and blood. And so, your child is sleepy. It's time, to put little Johnny or little Sally or whoever in bed, and they either want a story or they want a song, and your job is to sing that song or tell that story in such a way that they feel loved, protected, nurtured, connected, and are finally ready to say goodbye to this day and get ready to embrace the tomorrow. And look at the chant that we'll sing, whichever one it will be. We'll start with "Oh God Beautiful," lovely chant to God in the form of nature, lots of experiences of nature, and then God in the form of human connection, human relationships. And take that chant, just that chant to start with, and feel that it's yours. This is your chant. This is your own call to the divine. Swami Kriyananda had a lovely experience that we've shared one few times, but in India, he was in a taxi, and the taxi driver was a Sikh, wore a turban, and Swamiji was commenting to him because this chant comes from Guru Nanak, the founder of the Sikh religion. And he's commented to that driver, we love to sing a chant of your Guru, Guru Nanak, O God beautiful. And without missing a beat, the driver said, oh, what would life be if you couldn't sing to God? And Swamiji was brought to tears by that because, here's a taxi driver in Delhi or somewhere. And, it was the most natural thing in the world. Well, of course you sing to God. Well, tonight, let's sing to God as if it's the most obvious thing in the world to do and call with heart's fervor the way you would pray, the way you would love and nurture and support your child if they were sick or really any time. But it's, of course, more poignant when there's something serious going on. Call to the chant, call through the chant to the divine. We're following in Yogananda's footsteps. Yogananda has spiritualized this chant and many of the other ones that we'll do this evening. So every time we sing it, we're following right in his footsteps to the realization that he had of God through that chant. So feel that we're passing through the same doorway that he went through. When we finish each chant, take it profoundly inside. Continue the words mentally. We'll get a little soft as we finish each chant, but then keep on going. The chant doesn't stop just because the music stops. The chant should continue in your heart. Really, the chant should continue through your life. Tonight we just have an hour and a half together, but all of us have a life together in a sense. What chant will you chant through your life? So sing that way this evening, and we will feel the presence of the Divine Mother. We will feel the presence of God in whatever form is most dear for you, but call with that kind of devotion and sincerity, and you'll feel the response and the result. So we'll begin now with Oh God Beautiful. So during those pauses in between the chants, go deep in the repetition of the chant, but then also go deep into stillness, because chanting isn't just about chanting. Yogananda called it half the battle, but he was also referring to where chanting leads us, which chanting leads us into stillness and meditation. So follow the chant all the way to stillness. We'll sing a few more chants, we'll have a short meditation, and then dive into the divine even more deeply in meditation. Oh God, beautiful, oh God, beautiful, oh God, beautiful, oh God. At thy feet I bow, at thy feet I bow, oh God, beautiful, oh God, oh God, beautiful, oh God. In the forest thou art free, in the forest thou art free, in the mountain thou art high, in the mountain thou art high, in the river thou art restless, in the river thou art restless, in the ocean thou art great. the love, thou art love. To the sorrowful, thou art sympathy. To the sorrowful, thou art sympathy. To the young, thou art bliss. To the young, thou art bliss. Oh God, beautiful, oh God. Oh God, beautiful, oh God. At thy feet, all I do die. At thy feet, all I do die. Oh God, beautiful, oh God. Oh God, beautiful, oh God. In the forest, thou art free. In the forest, thou art free. In the mountain, thou art high. In the mountain, thou art high. In the river, thou art restless. In the river, thou art restless. In the ocean, thou art great. In the ocean, thou art great. Oh God, beautiful, oh God. Oh God, beautiful, oh God. At thy feet, oh, I do bow. At thy feet, oh, I do bow. Oh God, beautiful, oh God. Oh God, beautiful, oh God. To the service of thou art service. To the service of thou art service. To the love, thou art love. To the love, thou art love. To the sorrowful, thou art sympathy. To the sorrowful, thou art sympathy. To the young, thou art bliss. To the young, thou art bliss. Oh God, beautiful, oh God. Oh God, beautiful, oh God. At thy feet, oh, I do bow. At thy feet, oh, I do bow. Oh God, beautiful, oh God. Oh God, beautiful, oh God. To the service, thou art service. To the service, thou art service. To the lover, thou art love. To the lover, thou art love. To the sorrowful, thou art sympathy. To the sorrowful, thou art sympathy. To the yogi, thou art bliss. To the yogi, thou art bliss. Oh God, beautiful, oh God. Oh God, beautiful, oh God. Oh God, beautiful, oh God. This next chant will be: in the temple of silence, in the temple of peace, I will meet thee, I will touch thee, I will love thee, and coax thee to my altar of peace. In the temple of samadhi, in the temple of bliss, I will meet thee, I will touch thee, I will love thee, and coax thee to my altar of bliss.
In the temple of silence, in the temple of peace, in the temple of silence, in the temple of peace, I will meet thee, I will touch thee, I will love thee, and close thee to my altar of peace. And close me to my altar of peace. In the temple of samadhi, in the temple of bliss, in the temple of samadhi, in the temple of bliss, I will meet thee, I will touch thee, I will love thee, and close me to my altar of bliss, and close me to my altar of bliss. In the temple of silence, in the temple of peace, in the temple of silence, in the temple of peace, I will meet thee, I will touch thee, I will love thee, and close me to my altar of peace, and close me to my altar of peace. In the temple of samadhi, in the temple of bliss, in the temple of samadhi, in the temple of bliss, I will meet thee, I will touch thee, I will love thee, and close me to my altar of bliss, and close me to my altar of bliss. In the temple of silence, in the temple of peace, in the temple of silence, in the temple of peace, I will meet thee, I will touch thee, I will love thee, and close me to my altar of peace, and close me to my altar of peace. In the temple of samadhi, in the temple of bliss, in the temple of samadhi, in the temple of bliss, I will meet thee, I will touch thee, I will love thee, and close me to my altar of bliss, and close me to my altar of bliss, and close me to my altar of bliss.
we'll sing a chant that was originally written in Italian, so I'll sing it once in Italian. Dio nella notte, which means God in the nighttime, literally. In English, the title's been translated to Lord when in darkness. Lord, in confusion, always I'll follow thee. If I grieve or lose my way, only thou canst comfort me. All I live for is to love thee, my eternal friend. Dio nella notte, Dio nel buio, seguirò sempre te. Dio nella notte, Dio nel buio, seguirò sempre te. Quando mi perdo, quando piango, so che tu sei con me. Quando mi perdo, quando piango, so che tu sei con me. Vivo solo per amarti, oh Signore. Vivo solo per amarti, oh Signore. Lord, when in darkness, Lord, in confusion, always I'll follow thee. Lord, when in darkness, Lord, in confusion, always I'll follow thee. If I grieve or lose my way, only thou canst comfort me. If I grieve or lose my way, only thou canst comfort me. All I live for is to love thee, my eternal friend. All I live for is to love thee, my eternal friend. Dio nella notte, Dio nel buio, seguirò sempre te. Dio nella notte, Dio nel buio, seguirò sempre te. Quando mi perdo, quando piango, so che tu sei con me. Quando mi perdo, quando piango, so che tu sei con me. Vivo solo per amarti, oh Signore. Vivo solo per amarti, oh Signore. Lord, when in darkness, Lord, in confusion, always I'll follow thee. Lord, when in darkness, Lord, in confusion, always I'll follow thee. If I grieve or lose my way, only thou canst comfort me. If I grieve or lose my way, only thou canst comfort me. All I live for is to love thee, my eternal friend. All I live for is to love thee, my eternal friend. Vivo solo per amarti, oh Signore. All I live for is to love thee, my eternal friend. All I live for is to love thee, my eternal friend. Let's meditate for a few minutes. Om. Peace. Amen. So we will share a few stories now, and I think Nirmala will go first, and I will turn the camera in her direction. So give us just a moment to re-situate ourselves here.
So I'm going to tell you just a few little stories about people's lives that have inspired me. And one of these people is the famous orator in ancient Greece, Demosthenes. And he was born, I think, 584, somewhere in there, BC. And he was a tremendous orator and really was the heart and soul, the voice of Athens in activism and fighting for freedom and justice and truth. And Demosthenes was orphaned at age 7. He was very sickly. He was frail. His father was a very rich man. He was a sword maker, and he had amassed a great fortune. It was one of the ways you could really make money in those days, was making swords. And Demosthenes' father had left his son a tremendous legacy. He had land and a great deal of money, but he put in charge of this legacy for his son 3 men who proved to be terrible guardians. They just wasted the money on themselves and refused to pay tutors. And so Demosthenes was unable to get the wonderful education that he had been entitled to, that his father meant for him to have. And he couldn't distinguish himself in school. And the other place in ancient Greece where he could have distinguished himself was the gymnasia, in the games and the bouts of strength and physicality. He was too frail and sickly to be part of that. And on top of all of this misfortune, he had a speech impediment. However, one day, Demosthenes was in Athens, in the town, and he heard an orator speaking. And there were people opposing this man, but through the power of his command of language and his force of delivery and his presence, he defeated all of the opposition. And Demosthenes, as this young, awkward child, was enthralled with this orator. And he resolved that he too would become an orator. And he realized that this was the way that he could get back his inheritance that had been stolen from him. And so he put all of his energy into learning how to overcome this speech impediment. And he devised all kinds of strange exercises to work on his voice and make his impediment disappear. For example, he would fill his mouth with little stones and he would talk through all this impediment in his mouth. And other times he would go to the ocean and he would make his voice loud enough to be heard over the roar of the waves. And he would lock himself in his study. He had an underground study mate. He had at least this much left from his father. He had a place to live, a little bit of land, and a few servants, and that's all he had. So he had them dig this underground study, and he would lock himself in there. Sometimes he would shave off half of his hair. So he would be too embarrassed to go outside. He wanted to just concentrate and study the law. He studied all the nuances of Athens' law so that he could confront these people who had stolen his fortune. And he eventually, through practicing these exercises and practicing in front of a mirror so that he could see what he looked like and change his posture and his stance and be as powerful as this orator that he had seen. And he practiced and practiced. And he put all of his energy into overcoming and perfecting his art and learning everything he could about the law. And then he went out and he gave speeches. And it didn't go well at first, but he kept going. Nothing would deter him. And finally, he brought a suit against these three guardians who had basically abandoned him and squandered the fortune. And they brought suits in retaliation, and they hired lawyers, and they made all this fuss and tried to defame him. Demosthenes kept going. And he gave speech after speech after speech. And through tremendous effort, he overcame and he won his case. And of course, there wasn't much money left. There wasn't much to be gained at that point, except that he had gained a reputation as an amazing orator who had won against these men. And he went on to be a political activist and to really inspire his city state of Athens to fight for independence, to live by justice and by truth. And he opposed the opposition, sometimes unsuccessfully. He was always against the king of Macedonia, who was intent on conquering all of Athens and having it for himself. And it was a tough battle. And he eventually succumbed to the opposition. And in fact, the king at that time sent an assassin to take Demosthenes' life. And he gave one final speech and had tricked this assassin so that he thought Demosthenes was going to write a letter to his family to say goodbye to them. Instead, he drank a poison so that he could take his own life instead of having someone else take it from him. And so he gave one final speech and gave up his life for that cause of justice. So this is a very inspiring story to me because he did not give up. No matter what it was, he continued until he overcame. So another story is about Thomas Jefferson, who, it's reported, also had a speech impediment. And he was a very quiet, contemplative, reserved person. And then on top of that, to have a speech impediment was very difficult for him. And so he was a terrible public speaker. But he had his heart set on politics. And so he could fight this speech impediment, as Demosthenes did, or he could channel his energy in a different direction. And that is what Thomas Jefferson chose to do. He channeled his energy into writing. He put all of his willpower, all of his time, all of his consciousness into perfecting this art of writing. And so when the founding fathers of this country wanted to write a Declaration of Independence, they turned to Thomas Jefferson. And he wrote the Declaration of Independence in one draft. It's stunning to think of that. So it's not as though we have to just push and push and push against something that nature has given us. Instead, we can channel it into another channel, into something else. It's up to us. But in either case, either of these two men, they channeled their energy. They didn't give up. They didn't hide out because they were embarrassed or too afraid or too timid or too self-conscious to make an effort. They made the effort and it paid off. Another president that I greatly admire, as many, many people do, is Abraham Lincoln. And Abraham Lincoln suffered quite a lot in his life. He lost his mother at a very early age, which affected him very deeply. And as a young man, he lost the girl that he loved. And he lost every election as he was going through his political life. He lost election after election until he won the presidency. And he found in the difficult situation that the country was in, that so much of the trauma that he had gone through taught him a great deal that prepared him for this moment, this difficult moment of the Emancipation Proclamation and Civil War and trying to bring equality and freedom to all people. He also suffered from what was called in those days melancholy, which now we know is depression. It's a medical condition. But he had many bouts of depression, which forced him into silence and seclusion and deep contemplation. He was a very great man and suffered not only from depression, but other physical maladies too. It's been said in other things that I've read that if he hadn't been assassinated, he would have died within the year anyway. So he was given in this life so many trials and tribulations that prepared him for a great moment in history that he could rise to, that he could, through all he'd gone through, feel the compassion and have the tremendous patience that it took to lead this country during that terrible time. And I'll just end with one other very short story about a great inventor, Thomas Edison. And Edison, it was said by Nikola Tesla, who worked with Edison in Edison's laboratory for only a month. And Tesla was just, he said, if Edison was charged with finding a needle in a haystack, he would go about the task of individually looking at every single straw. And as we know, probably most of us, he kind of had to do that when he was inventing the light bulb. He went through I don't know how many hundreds and hundreds of materials looking for that one filament, tungsten, that would finally work in a light bulb. So he had that kind of patience. So this story happened one day. Now, bear in mind that Edison at this point was 67 years old. So he had spent the day at his laboratory as usual. He came home and had his dinner. And a friend rushed in and said, "Your research campus is on fire." It was just a few miles from Edison's home. And so he calmly and quickly made his way there. Well, it was an incredible fire. And the firefighters from 8 surrounding towns had all rushed there, and even all of them could not contain this fire. So when Edison got there were hundreds of employees and onlookers. Everyone was just devastated that this fire was happening. So Edison walks through the crowd looking for his son. He finds his son and he says, with this childlike cheerfulness and enthusiasm, he says, "Go find your mother and tell her to come here and bring all her friends. They have never seen a fire like this and they'll never see one like it again." And because of all the chemicals in these buildings, the flames were yellow and green and reaching 6 or 7 stories in the air. It was an incredible fire. And his son said, "What are you talking about? You just are, everything's ruined." And Edison calmed his son down and said, "It's okay. We just are getting rid of a lot of rubbish." So the next day he was interviewed by a reporter, and Edison already had his men out there cleaning things up and getting ready for production again. And the reporter said, "Well, what do you think about this? I mean, it's total devastation." And Edison said, "I'm not too old." He was 67. "I'm not too old to start afresh. And I've been through a lot of things like this. It keeps a person from being bored." And so he rose to the occasion. Within 3 weeks, they had it cleaned up. Within the month, they started production. Now, it should be remembered that the whole campus was made from this supposedly fireproof concrete. And so he and his investors did not believe that a fire could really take this campus. And so they didn't insure it for more than a third of what it was worth. So it's estimated that he lost about $1 million. So in those days, $1 million in our currency would be about $23 million. So that's what they had lost. Within a year, they had made $10 million. So that's like worth $100 million. If you take what is given to us, there's a Latin phrase, amor fati. If we love everything that happens, if we lean into it instead of cringing away from it, if we see it as a chance, as he did, to start fresh, to put out tremendous energy, they started making products that people had never seen before. They just tore up the market. They succeeded. They not only had a spectacular disaster, but they made it into a spectacular success. So if we can also remember this and think in these terms as he did, that it's not something that we have to do, it's something that we get to do, then suddenly we have all the enthusiasm we need to accomplish whatever is in front of us. Would you like me to change the camera for you? Okay.
So I'm going to share a story that is, in a sense, a little closer to home because it relates to someone who had a challenging life that we both knew quite well, Nirmala more so than me, but even I got to know her fairly well, Nirmala's mother. And what reminded me of, or what sort of brought her to mind, was a very simple little phrase that Yogananda offered to his disciples in a letter, in the form of a letter, a small part of a letter. He said, "An easy life is not a victorious life." And, if you think of the stories that Nirmala just told of these various people and what they went through and how they responded and, sort of what became of it, what became of their And it's easy to rue the challenges that we get. Easy to feel badly or to feel inadequate or to feel incapable or to feel, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And in Nirmala's mother's case, she had wanted a certain path in life and it was not given to her. Oh my God, my mic is off. Jeez, sorry guys. There, okay. Sorry. I don't know if you could hear that at all, but anyway, I think
Back up a little.
now you can hear a whole lot better. So anyway, I'll just rewind slightly in case you couldn't hear me at all. Yogananda had this little phrase, an easy life is not a victorious life. And that simple phrase exemplifies, in a sense, the stories that Nirmala just told about these different men who responded in vigorous, energetic ways to deal with how life had dealt with them, starting with a speech impediment, times two, Abraham Lincoln suffering in various ways, huge losses, difficult karma, coming into, politics at a time when the country was coming apart at the seams, leading the country through that, reuniting the country, etc. And Edison responding humorously and energetically to disaster. All of us have that potential. All of us have that opportunity. And Nirmala's mother did this in her own way. And, not everyone's life is going to be this bold, spectacular, public life. Some people's lives are much more private, but she lived her life for God. And she, many people, the concept of the mother-in-law often doesn't rank real high in human relations. It's interesting because we just posted a video of Nirmala's that will go up tomorrow. That's up there now, but those who get the newsletter will see the link for it tomorrow. But if you go on our channel, you'll see it tonight as well, about creating harmonious relationships. And in the category of harmonious relationships, the mother-in-law related, mother-in-law, son-in-law, mother-in-law, daughter-in-law, especially, that doesn't rank real high in the harmonious relationship category. I feel in many ways that my mother-in-law was a saint, and saints are not always the easiest people to live with. They're kind of can be challenging. They have really, really strong ideas about things. She could not be swayed out of her. When she got something in her mind, that's how it was going to be. And wow, that's really intense. But two things that I appreciated about her. One of them was a life commitment that she made. Multiple life commitments, really. Her life was for God. Her life was about prayer. She lived the life of a cloistered nun who didn't have a cloister. She had a family. And I mean, especially more later in her life. And she lived a life of prayer. She was offering prayer all day long. And she did something that it's a small thing in its way, but she organized all of the details around what would happen when she died. And again, and she would, every year or two, every 3 years when we would see her, she would bring out the papers and she would show us, and she'd show us where they were so that, if something happened, we would know where to go and where to find them. And she organized every detail. She didn't want us worrying about it. I mean, on one level, it wouldn't have been that much to worry about. On another level, as it turned out, in the year of a pandemic, it would have been pretty challenging to deal with some of those things. And she made light of it. To her, it was just another thing like the grocery list, pick up some canned tuna or pick up some, vegetables or whatever. I mean, it's like, okay, got to show the kids the paper, make sure this is all organized. It was just another thing. Most of us are sort of all, it's like, we can't talk about that scary D word. And for her, it was just the most matter of fact thing. I just so appreciated that. And again, the life of a person dedicated to God can be very simple, can be very humble outwardly. Inside, there is stainless steel, there is iron, there is this will. And I think of, she was a small person, she probably was 5 feet or less, the Nirmala is saying, and and a slight 5 feet or less, not a big, massive 5 feet or less. And I think of these saints that we've encountered in Europe, in Italy especially, who were tiny. I mean, some of them were barely 4 feet tall. And Saint Clare, whose body lies in Assisi, she was tiny, and yet when an army was invading, an army of warriors was invading, and they were approaching her convent, she came out the second story window or door. She held up the host, the sacred body of Christ in the form of this wafer, and basically told them all, you cannot pass here. You cannot come here. And I don't know what they saw, but they did not come any farther forward. They backed off. It was like, whatever this is, we are not dealing with this. And that's kind of how it was with Nirmala's mom. There were times when you knew you were not going to win this battle. You just let it go. Whether it makes sense, whether it doesn't make sense, whether our rational minds can conceive of where she was going with something, we just had to let that be, because she was one really, really determined soul. And that's what it takes. And we saw it with Swamiji. I remember seeing it with other disciples, direct disciples of Yogananda. There was a signature across their lives. There was a humor. There was a fiery willpower. There was, in some cases, these were really shy people. These were very inward people. But there was something inside of them that Master had touched and given to them, had blessed them with. And it was similar with Nirmala's mom as well. She had been blessed by Christ in a unique way. I can't put words around it, and I won't even try, but it was tangibly definite. And all of us have been blessed in one way or another. So I'll just conclude by sort of asking you the question, whose blessing do you wear? Whose blessing has motivated and energized your life? Share that blessing with other people. Doesn't mean you have to clout them over the head with philosophy that they're not interested in. Nirmala's mom didn't do that. She was not a big proselytizer. She did it in her little way, in her humble way. She was not afraid to talk about these things. But she was also quite willing to let people be who they were and do whatever they did. But her life spoke clearly and loudly and directly. And all of ours can do the same. We all can aspire to the examples that Nirmala shared, and the few little examples I've shared also. Live that life, and you will find a deep, deep blessing in your own heart, in your own realization. So I'd like to share a song, and I'm going to get Nirmala to come, and we'll put the camera back the way it was, and you can play this. This is tuned up now. Swami Kriyananda wrote the song "Through Many Lives," and Nirmala will play the tambura, and I'll sing this. And this is it's In the northern hemisphere, at least, this is winter time, and even though here in California we get these little false springs like today where it feels like it's going to just be glorious, it can get cold and rainy and snowy and nasty again quite quickly, so we never quite know. But this is a wonderful time to just have the perspective, the broad scope of understanding that this is one life. It's like a breath in eternity, however long it is. 100 years, maybe, people are talking about living to 150, 180, 200. Whether you'd really want to do that is another question. Obviously, if you're going to do that, you want to be very healthy, you want to keep learning, you want to keep growing, etc. Whether we live 5 more minutes, 5 more years, 5 more decades, whatever it may be, fill it with the light. And this song is a call in that direction. Well, it was in tune, I thought. That's pretty good. Here, we need to give you a mic. Can you pull your mic just a little bit? Through many lives I've drunk the cup of laughter. No man could tell the pleasures I have known. The stars in the endless sky, if one could count, would come to billions. Yet as vast as are their numbers, so many years I've wandered far from you. Through many lives I've drunk the cup of sorrow. No man could tell the bitter tears I've shed. The drops in the endless sea, if one could count, would come to billions. Yet as vast as are their numbers, so many years I've wandered far from you. Through countless lives I've sought your cup of sweetness, found other cups, yet thirsted evermore. The streams in the hills of time all found their way into a desert. Every noon of bright fulfillment, ere many hours did sink to evening gloom. I long for you in summer and in winter, only for you my heart thirsts day and night. I've learned that the sweetest songs ears ever heard were but your echoes. Lord, at last, fill me completely, for nevermore I'd wander far from you. Lord, at last, fill me completely, for nevermore I'd wander far from you. Do you want to try to find the music?
What are the chords?
E minor, D, G. Rante, rante, bolo, rante, govinda, bolo. Rante, 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 bolo, rante, go. Sorry, guys. One sec here. Rante, 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 bolo, rante, govinda, bolo. Rante, 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 bolo.
What's that one?
Oh, it's going to be COVID. Rante, 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 bolo. So A minor, G, C, A minor.
Go ahead. I'm going to play the bells on this.
Okay, all right. Rante, 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 bolo, rante, govinda, bolo, rante, 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 bolo, rante, So we'll have a couple more chants now. And the first of these is O thou blue sky under blue cover, hast thou hidden my beloved Lord? Open thy cover, let me discover my beloved Lord in thy heart of hearts. Hast thou hidden my beloved Lord? O thou blue sky under blue cover, hast thou hidden my beloved Lord? O thou blue sky under blue cover, hast thou hidden my beloved Lord? Open thy cover, let me discover. Open thy cover, let me discover my beloved Lord in thy heart of hearts, my beloved Lord in thy heart of hearts. O thou blue sky under blue cover, hast thou hidden my beloved Lord? O thou blue sky under blue cover, hast thou hidden my beloved Lord? Open thy cover, let me discover. Open thy cover, let me discover my beloved Lord in thy heart of hearts, my beloved Lord in thy heart of hearts. O thou blue sky under blue cover, hast thou hidden my beloved Lord? O thou blue sky under blue cover, hast thou hidden my beloved Lord? Open thy cover, let me discover. Open thy cover, let me discover my beloved Lord in thy heart of hearts,
my beloved Lord, in my heart of hearts. From sky under blue cover, hast thou hidden my beloved Lord. From sky under blue cover, hast thou hidden my beloved Lord. Open thy cover, let me discover. Open thy cover, let me discover my beloved Lord in my heart of hearts. My beloved Lord in my heart of hearts. Thou blue sky under blue cover, hast thou hidden my beloved Lord. Thou blue sky under blue cover, hast thou hidden my beloved Lord. Open thy cover, let me discover. Open thy cover, let me discover. Open thy cover, let me discover. Open thy cover, let me discover my beloved Lord in thy heart of hearts. My beloved Lord in thy heart of hearts. Thou blue sky under blue cover, hast thou hidden my beloved Lord. Thou blue sky under blue cover, hast thou hidden my beloved Lord. Open thy cover, let me discover. Open thy cover, let me discover. Open thy cover, let me discover. Open thy cover, let me discover my beloved Lord in thy heart of hearts. My beloved Lord in thy heart of hearts. Open thy cover, let me discover. Open thy cover, let me discover my beloved Lord in thy heart of hearts. 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 Lord, I am thine, I am thine, I am thine. Lord, I am thine, I am thine. Lord, I am thine, I am thine, I am thine. Lord, I am thine, I am thine. Be thou mine, Lord, be thou mine. Be thou mine, Lord, be thou mine. I am thine, I am thine. Be thou mine, Lord, be thou mine. Be thou mine, Lord, be thou mine. I am thine, I am thine. Lord, I am thine, I am thine, I am thine. Lord, I am thine, I am thine. Lord, I am thine, I am thine, I am thine. Lord, I am thine, I am thine. Be thou mine, be thou mine, be thou mine. I am thine. Be thou mine, be thou mine, be thou mine. I am thine. Lord, I am thine, I am thine, I am thine. Lord, I am thine, I am thine. Lord, I am thine, I am thine, I am thine. Lord, I am thine, I am thine. Be thou mine, be thou mine, be thou mine, be thou mine. I am Let's close now chanting Om, sending vibrations of peace and harmony throughout the world and beyond. Om, peace. Amen. God bless you all.
Jai Guru.
Jai Guru.